Well, hey, Michael, welcome. Welcome to what actually is going to be my first fully recorded podcast episode to
Thank you.
what I am now calling the Design Review, which is the podcast for engineering your life. The format is going to be really, really simple. This is a chat. This is a conversation. It is going to be centered around something that you care about. But if we wander off track, I'm okay with that.
Sounds good. Well, I'm honored to be a part of the very first fully recorded episode. And I'm ADHD, so honestly, even if there was a lined out plan, we would be off track anyway. So perfect.
This should be quite fascinating to see where we end up by the time we're done. I have a thought about how I'd like to structure this, and we can follow it or not. And
Okay.
that's all great. And so the overall thing, I call it design review, but I've had years of experience back when I was an engineering manager and a technology leader in meeting with my team, some of who reported to me, some of whom were researchers elsewhere, just checking in about what's going on with the project. And that seemed to me to one, be kind of on brand. And I kind of have a thing about being on brand, but also because being on brand is more like, that's how I am.
Mhm.
And so what I'd love to do is talk to you about something that you're up to. And there's various things that I have to ask you about it, but are you up for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm an open book.
Okay. Yay. Well,
I
open
don't
books.
even know what off brand means, so go for it.
I love that. Well, being authentic is the point, and I love that. So, one of the things that if I was going to kind of get familiar with it, what I found in the past is that people launch into talking about their things, but if I don't know what they're about or why they even exist, then I get lost. So if you could kind of start to me, kind of let me know whatever it is that you're interested in, give me a little bit of a backstory about what's the context and why you think it's important, and then we'll just go from there.
Okay, sounds good. Well, honestly, I've actually been doing a lot of exploring this exact topic for the past month. So, little backstory, was just laid off a month ago, and for years and years, I pretty much made like the logical, careful decisions. I'm still thriving, still very happy with my family, and I made work the best I could, but ultimately, just trying to stay comfortable. And I actually just wrote a post about that today. But the idea was just to coast along, survive, not really thrive, but, do the best I can. So the past month, I've done a lot of exploration and discovered that ever since the beginnings when I taught for 12 years, elementary school, to even now in each of the roles I've held, something that I'm really passionate about is building community. I feel like, especially after COVID, all of us are handling somewhat a feeling of loneliness, of wanting to belong, wanting to have some worth, wanting some friendship. And so I've kind of just fallen into that calling, really. I'm trying to connect with people, trying to, as you said once, lean into the discomfort of that and grow and bring other people with me on that growth journey.
Oh, that's awesome. And I've kind of come to the realization that anybody that I end up connecting with, usually it's from LinkedIn, that there's some strong overlap in these kinds of feelings. And I'm already like getting the feels for what you're talking about. So it resonates with me. It's also something that I've found relatively recently in LinkedIn, because I've been on LinkedIn for like years, but I never did anything with it until I posted a retirement announcement a year and a half ago. And that went through its own like emotional roller coaster. And even then it was like I found the coaching community. And then something happened a few months ago when the whole weird LinkedIn phenomenon kicked in and like created some community around that. So I'll just say that in the realm of online community, I feel you on that, and like, yay, that you're into that.
Well, and part of it's just natural for me. Like I used to call it a weakness, but really I've learned that it's a strength. But I could never put on that corporate polish. Was never good at that. Like I said it the other day that it was kind of like Pine Sol. Everybody knows Pine Sol is not good for your wood furniture, but dang, does it smell and look good. And that's kind of that's kind of what LinkedIn used to be, but also just a lot of people's vibe for years and years was putting that corporate polish on, and now everybody's just yearning for being free of it.
I hear you. And sometimes we may not even know that we need to be free of it until we notice that we are. And it's like, whoa,
Yeah.
man, I 2 months ago, I could barely breathe, but I didn't know it.
Yeah. For
You
sure.
ever have that kind of situation where you like don't realize how imprisoned you are until you're out of it?
Yep. I mean, just getting laid off a month ago, that was horrible timing. And then after it happened, I connected with a bunch of people from work and who had previously worked there. And every single one of them were telling me the same thing, like, congrats. You left a toxic environment. You're able to be yourself now. I can see your demeanor has changed. So, yeah.
That's really great. So given you're seeing that there's an opportunity here, what is it that you're up to?
Well, so I'm still growing, still discovering all that. But I've been putting out some different content that just kind of, honestly, they're just things that resonate for myself. And if they mean something to me, surely they mean something to someone else. So sometimes it's just about, like, I have a series right now. It's a very short blurb on 1% better every day. And it's just little tips that are like, go thank somebody that's made a difference in your life. It takes you 2 seconds to do it, and it's going to make their day and your day much better. And I have these little bits each day that somebody is able to do. So kind of putting out some content that I'm trying to just make a small impact in other people's lives. And then also things like this, like, I can promise you a month ago, I would have bet money I would never, ever do any podcast related things. I got an invite to do a speaker position also today. Never in a million years would I have done that.
Oh,
I'm taking up some places that I never thought I would do.
That's really great to hear, and I'm delighted that you were willing to have this conversation, especially in this like unformed no history podcast. Because like a few weeks ago, I wouldn't have done this.
Don't get me wrong, I'm bouncing my knee over here. This drink might have half a shot of rum in it, but
I hear you, and it's like you said, kind of quoting me, like leaning into the discomfort is that's what the opportunity for growth is, and I applaud you for feeling there's something to be done and being willing to try, experiment. That's actually one of my jams is the idea of like trying something and see what happens. I cannot pretend that's how I used to run my life. I used to have like this death grip on try not to screw up, try to be perfect, try to only look good. And oh my God, that was exhausting. That's very performative.
Oh, and then you have a repeat of everything that happened before too.
Yeah.
My wife and I discovered that. We've always made all these life decisions together that we're happy, but we're not pursuing anything really. And so then we're wondering why, like, I'm still as broke as I was last year. So
yeah, there's a lot in this conversation. I love that you're like having these conversations with your wife, and we don't necessarily know what the right path is, but we can be financially successful and spiritually bankrupt. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I think that may be a very common occurrence that seems to be tied with the whole performative idea. And we can also be, spiritually rich and like struggling.
Yeah.
So, you don't necessarily get one hand in hand, but I have found that the opportunities that are out there in the world, I now see many more of them, that I am more grounded and connected to what matters to me. And it turns out, like you said, what matters to me is connection and community and feeling like I'm a part of something. So I appreciate that you're doing that. Thanks. One of the things that you mentioned is like how you're posting in terms of like little tips about try this and talk about gratitude or appreciation. There's different ways of doing that. One is like, here's your lesson for the day. Go do this. Another side of it is like, this is what I've done and I've experienced. What's your thought? How do you run inside those approaches?
Hmm. Well, so I taught for 12 years, right? So teachers, one of our superpowers is pulling a lesson out of nothing. Especially because you have to be agile like that. Like a teacher's day never goes how they planned. So a lot of the times you have to be able to pivot. You have to take this small group out of the large group and do something different with them. You've got to take the learning and change it up for each person's modalities. And so I'm doing a lot of that, like mixing it up, telling stories wherever I can. I mean, obviously from after teaching, then I got into sales. And the best way to sell somebody something is to tell them a story. And so a lot of times, not that I'm trying to sell anything, but people resonate with stories. So I try to, like the other day, my daughter was asleep in the back seat. It's like 1 o'clock. But for a 5-year old, that's a long day already by 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
So she's conked back there, and I'm sitting there waiting on my wife to get back into the car from the grocery store. And instantly, I'm pulling up LinkedIn. I've got a great story about how, sometimes we get conked out by 1 p.m., but resilience. And I'm just going to town relating, the day into a lesson.
I love that. And yeah, when it's a popular discussion these days. But one of the things that I hear, and our friend Sarah also has this as part of her lessons, is that she was trying various formats, but when she hit on story,
Mm-hmm.
just talking about life, that it resonated powerfully with people. And I'll say that when people not only talk to me about story, but it's their story.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like I'm going to tell you a story so that you learn this thing from me.
Right.
I not that that's bad, but I end up getting defensive if somebody's trying to like tell me I need to learn something. But if they're sharing something purely from their own experience, then I'm free to learn from it as I wish.
Right.
And I find that really inviting. And particularly if they had to learn something kind of painful, then I can like be with them in that. My empathy gene can get enacted. And then I can find like, oh, wow, I've lived through my version. Maybe yours was with your daughter, but mine was with, an employee, or something like that. And I really like that you're doing that. Is that, do you tend to, is that pretty much how it rolls? Or do you end up coming in with like, here's a lesson that I would love to share. How can I share it well?
Honestly, so I guess on the flip side of that too is nobody wants to learn from somebody that's never been in those shoes before.
Okay.
So like I had a manager once that taught us a lot of lessons on how to sell, but this was just a year or 2 years ago. He sold in the 80s. Well, that was a long time ago for sales, and the lessons aren't the same. He doesn't know what it's like. And so I feel like when I'm putting something out there, it's always going to be something that relates to me, something I've walked in those shoes before. I'm not going to try to tell you about how to be a good woman because I don't have the slightest clue.
Yeah.
So I feel like people, that comes back to me in that regard because I care and so they care too. It helps them because it helps me.
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
know if that answered your question or not.
well, it does, and it opens up some new doors. I mean, I'll just have to walk through the ones that present themselves.
Sorry, we did preface this with a tangent.
That's that squirrel, That's like,
Right.
speaking of squirrel, who's on the wall behind you?
Yeah. So the daughter I mentioned, my 5-year-old, she is a huge artist, loves to do art. So that's her latest creations, just out of the blue, wrote those. My son is getting into all things athleticism. And so he's a little skateboarder right now, or roller skates or scooter or bicycle. I mean, you name it, he's on it. So yeah, that's my two youngest ones. And then here you can see my wife and I.
Okay, and who's the blue guy?
Well, I must admit, I'm not really sure, but its intention is to be dad on Bluey. Which I'm sure you've heard of the show Bluey.
I've heard of it, but I've never seen it. So
it's one of those kids shows that honestly is more for the adults, but not in an adult content way. Like it's really, you watch that show and you're like, wow, I wish I was more like them. Like a better parent and a better communicator, or whatever.
Nice.
So that's supposed to be the dad on there. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's cool. I love the reminders. Well, and as you can tell from me, like I have some reminders behind me as well. So I think you can only see the monkey. I have 2 chairs there, but one may be out of screen. So the monkey is actually from the Build-A-Bear workshop. Have you ever done Build-A-Bear? And it was part of actually a therapy work that I had been through, an intensive therapy. And on like Thursday night, we were sent to go to Build-A-Bear and just build whatever occurs to you. And
that's a great thing to do in therapy.
That was the assignment. And so I went, and I didn't like the bears that much. And they had Christmas stuff. They had reindeers and abominable snowman. They had all kinds of stuff. But then I like found the monkey, and I'm like, oh yeah, I like the monkey. And so then I went off and like bought him an outfit. Actually, the outfit I got him was a tux,
nice
dress tux. And he has a beating heart in him. So if you like, you squeeze him, his heart will beat for a bit. And then they told us after we brought them in the next day that, okay, this pretty much represents your inner child. And we hadn't been given that instruction, but it turns out that, that guy, who goes now by the name of Little Robert, does represent in many ways my inner child. And or at least at maybe at age 5 to 10. And so not only that, he kind of looks like me. We have similar ears, right? Our hair is kind of similar. He's, he's very curious.
The tail.
Yeah, he's very curious. He's somewhat shy, and he's a little mischievous. So there's a lot of ways in which he and I are very similar. He's also really bright, likes to get into things and kind of like mess around and do stuff. So, and he has different outfits now. The tux was, he likes to dress up and, be appropriate. But he now has about 5 different seasonally appropriate attire.
Nice.
The hoodie's not going to last very long because it's Arizona and we're already getting in the upper 90s. So, but meanwhile, yeah, he sits there and occasionally he serves a purpose to like help me connect tangibly. Like I've had conversations with my inner child using him. And it's been really insightful. And meanwhile, I've taken him on trips. I've taken him up to Canada on a road trip. I've taken him camping. I seat belt him into my car. And it's helpful for me to remember that there's part of me that never got what I actually needed when I was young. That's a whole other story. But there's part of me that still like needs that level of, exploration, that level of adventure, that level of kind of like childlike wonder. And he helps me to remember that those are still things that are important to me to help me be a balanced human. So that's kind of my story about Little Robert there.
That's an awesome message. And honestly, when we had briefly talked before, you had kind of touched slightly on that fact that because you have an engineering background, but you're also extremely creative. And I kind of called that out and you're like, well, actually everyone's creative. And that's really restructured some of my thinking because we're taught, you're either logical or creative. You're not both, but I really would like to hear more about.
Okay. Well, I love that we can like flip the script here.
I mean, it's your podcast. You can talk about it.
It's all good, But meanwhile, yeah, I appreciate you asking the question. And I will also ask you the same thing. So just kind of be aware. So I grew up with what is often known as a fixed mindset, which is you're either good at something or not. And so there were things that I was good at that were relatively easy at first, like math and science for me were fun and easy. Music was something that was interesting to me. History was not. And I've also come to the realization that it was taught in such a dry way, like without story. It was taught with memorization, and I lost interest fast. So I had all these things, and I spent most of my life kind of, if I wasn't good at something immediately, I pretty much gave up on it and abandoned it. And, and so I didn't learn a lot. But later in my life, I've come to the realization through a lot of personal growth work I've done and then work I did at my company, which, I could fill podcast after podcast with just some of those stories because it was such an uplifting experience. I've come to the belief that people are born inherently creative. I mean, just look at the work your children have done, right? And that over time we get feedback that's critical or accusatory or judgmental or in some way, which can include like boys dancing, is that's not something boys do. Which the message I got from my dad was actually much more harsh than that. I mean, he literally told me that me doing a dance move in front of him repulsed him. So what we learn to like cover up and minimize ourselves to not be judged. And so the creative instinct, which requires the brain to just fluidly just flow, we start to like put all this armor on and walls up and constraints on it. Like it's only okay to be this way at certain times. It's okay to sing, but never in public. It's okay to dance, but like not in the middle of the shopping mall or whatever. The lessons that you learn before you're 10 tend to stick. And so I've been learning to allow my creativity to show more by just letting go of my need to have it be perfect, and or performative or good by somebody else's definition. And so what I've come to realize from my view of the world is I have not yet found somebody who is not a creative soul, but I found a lot of people who have learned to suppress their creativity or judge it. And even me, like I often will say when I do art therapy type work using pastels, and they almost always get like people going, "Oh, wow, you're an artist." I'm like, I'm no artist. No, I do spreadsheets. I make art in my spreadsheets. But so my belief, I think I'm trying to answer your question here, is that I think all humans, that part of being a human being is to be creative. And starting very early in life, we start unlearning, or we start learning how to cover that, mask that, minimize that, and reduce our expression, making ourselves smaller. And I think one, that we're much more creative than we give ourselves credit for being. And two, it's far healthier. And honestly, I think it's a spiritual expression to allow yourself to be creative in whatever ways that looks like. Maybe your creativity doesn't look like oil paintings. Maybe it's sculpture. Maybe it's Play-Doh. Maybe it is spreadsheets, which honestly, I can talk about that for a bit. And so my belief is that everyone has that within them. And that if you really want to enhance the creativity of an individual or a group, that the first thing you need to do is make it safe to be creative.
Yes.
Becomes its own other talk. But, how's that land?
I could definitely talk about that.
Go for it, man.
Well, I just wanted to say, I think we both know from our first initial chat that you invited me here maybe for other reasons, but especially because we have a lot of alignment in this. And I shared a little bit about that, but my stepfather, who pretty much raised me for my first 10 years of life, and as you said, you're a sponge at that age, and that really determines a lot of who you are. And so, yes, same thing. He totally, completely destroyed any form of creativity. Dancing, singing, forget it. We weren't allowed to do any of that as well. So fortunately, I'm extremely stubborn. Yeah. So I just was in my closet or on the bus or at school writing stories. I wrote books all the time, constantly writing, and I'd bring them to other people and show them to them. I was reading. I walked around in my hallways at school constantly with a book like this from classroom to classroom. So while a lot of that stuff hurt at home, I fought against it everywhere else. And I'm glad I did, of course. But one thing that I've noticed recently, which really supports what you're saying, is I have two things. My wife has always been a very logical thinker, very mathematical, very process driven. She would love to be, same thing like behind a spreadsheet. And so thinking the way that we were taught, she never thought she was a creative. And then, and bear with me here, then ChatGPT came along. And so she is in classes right now. She's got to write a lot of papers, and she was dreading it. She's like, I'm a horrible writer. She was saying that, I've never been able to create a thing. And ChatGPT with that and with some of my direction, I told her, like, just write it down. Write out whatever's coming to you, get it down on paper, and then ChatGPT can remove the problem you're having with formatting or grammar or spelling or whatever. Just get your ideas down there. Now, a year into her associates, and she can write a paper like that, and it's really, really good. Like, I proofread them for her, and I'm amazed how creative she is. So, which is a great use case for AI, right? Because it's not writing it for, it's removing those barriers to her creativity.
I love that. And I'm going to like take off with that prompt because there's a lot of talk and valid fear about AI. And by valid, I mean that it's a powerful tool. And so is a circular saw. And you can use a circular saw to make beautiful finished carpentry. And you could use a circular saw to remove digits, you know?
Right.
It's just a tool. And, you know, AI, there's a whole lot of things that can be talked about with it. But talking about it from this perspective, you can use AI to help you overcome your own barriers. And ultimately, while I want to be very careful about not letting AI do things that I want to still have the muscle to do, it's kind of like, have you ever seen the movie WALL-E?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, that picture of the future of humanity where we let the technology do for ourselves what we don't do for others ends up with us being gelatinous blobs that can't even walk. That can be a metaphor for lots of things. But one of the things I want to be careful for is that I don't want to relinquish my innate creative spark to a tool. And it could be easy to do that. So I'm watchful. But meanwhile, I have a real hard time with blank pages, like start from nothing. And sometimes with an ADHD brain, I can start spinning in so many directions that my CPU just like overheats and I never generate something coherent.
Yes.
And sometimes it can be really helpful just to have guidance. So what I've used ChatGPT for is, you know, give me some ideas about how I could do this. And then I'm like, I can breathe again, and then I can go pursue them.
Yeah.
And so what your wife is doing in terms of like using them for the area where she's had some like confidence related issues and maybe using it like literally like a crutch such that it's like temporary until she can kind of heal. I love that story. And honestly, I think there needs to be more stories about using AIs in ways that are net helpful instead of demonizing it. Because I don't think anything is inherently good nor inherently bad.
Right. Agreed.
And so talk to me about your creativity. What's it look like today?
Well, so I used to do a lot of blogging, and we did some vlogging as well. And now that I'm closer to 40, I don't know if I want to get back into vlogging. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see. But right now, my creativity is really based a lot around my content on LinkedIn. I'm really trying to put out some good stuff there. But I have some other things maybe up my sleeve. We are slowly developing some different ideas. But one of them is the Reframe Project, which you are familiar with, of course. But that's the idea, is to get together a think tank of people that are using their creative minds and their past experiences to kind of build systems alongside the broken systems. And so we're providing possible solutions to society's problems and trying to provide resources that people can draw from, and just bringing lots of different personalities and mindsets all together to think not in black and white ways, as we were just saying, but to think in the gray and to come up with creative ways to empower people. So right now, a lot of my creative focus is on that.
Well, let's talk about that. That sort of fits into the whole design review discussion format. So what have you been doing and how's that been going?
Okay. So right now we're still very early, and actually right after this I have a meeting with the other founder, and we're going to be kind of pushing some things forward. But right now we're getting basically the founding members together, defining who wants to be a part of this, but also being very, very careful about who is going to, because we really need people that are big critical thinkers that aren't going to be stuck thinking red or blue, this side of the fence or that side of the fence, thinking, like love and coalition. Those are the answers, so just coming together. So right now, that's what we're kind of doing, just bringing people that think like that together. And we're also doing a lot of, we're calling brain dumping. So anytime you randomly think throughout the day that this is a problem in society, or this is something you'd like to discuss or address in that think tank scenario, we're just dumping it all together. And sometimes I'll get a random message at 11 o'clock at night from somebody, and they're like, hey, what about resources for neurodivergent youth? And well, I'll just comment on it and then move on to the next thing the next day.
Okay.
Yeah.
It would seem that it could be very easy, especially if you have neurodivergent folks involved. And it seems like ripe material for neurodivergent thinking to be involved in, because of the pattern recognition that would be important, that it also could be pretty easy to get overwhelmed with the different number of ideas or to get distracted with that. So I want to get, first of all, I want to get a little bit clear about, so the stage you're in now is you're gathering a few like-minded people that want to see this happen, and you're creating a framework that you can then pull other people into or allow other people to contribute. Is that right?
Yeah. So that's exactly it. And then I think on down the road, we're probably going to pick some smaller cases to start working on. And so we can build up some evidence to build our trust in our organization. There's also going to be some other arms. Like, this is a nonprofit arm, but we're also going to have maybe an arm for the arts. So neurodivergent art can be showcased and published out there. There will be business arms, marketing, PR arms. Like, we're still working out all the vision of it. But
yeah, I got that. In fact, I'm about a year into my business and a couple of years into the idea of it, and I'm still figuring out what my realm is. I have the luxury of, like, I don't technically have to work right now. I mean, with the way that the stock market is going, my income has been impacted by that, but I have the luxury of not having to seek, find, and support a day job. So I can explore with some ease what my world is. Who is it that I help? What's that look like? And it sounds like you're kind of in that space as well. Is this, even though it's like really noble, really needed, is this something that you envision being able to help support you and your family?
So yeah, to answer your question, I'm not in that space as well, but I am not speaking that into existence either. I'm saying, do I need the money yesterday? Yes. But I feel very strongly that this is going to turn into something that's going to impact lives and my bank account. And
Okay.
that's
well,
not an important thing, but it is important.
Well, one of the things I'm realizing, because I grew up with this, like, the love of money is the root of all evil kind of expression, where my family, my mother in particular, I was raised by my mother, had this like very negative view of people of means, of wealth. And we had this like nobility around just barely surviving financially, such that I have a bit of an issue even now that I'm like expending quite a bit for my own training. Allowing people to pay for me is still something I'm working on about what I'm actually worth. Meanwhile, it's so much easier to help somebody else through this. So one of the things that I can see is that, like, it is absolutely appropriate that you are compensated for doing what you do in service of other people. And in my case, while I don't technically need the money to pay the mortgage and the groceries, if I want to travel, if I want to grow my business, if I want to publish, I'm going to need the money. So, right. It's not selfish,
right,
for me to allow myself to be paid and for that matter, paid well, for what I do. So, having a revenue model, even a nonprofit revenue stream, because you can have officers and a board and you can have a salary. That's a legit, and it's an appropriate thing to do. And I think one of the things that's kind of happening a bit around the LinkedIn founder circles is the being honest about that. Yeah, actually, I do expect to be compensated for this. And I would invite you to not be shy. about that. That's part of, it's a necessary thing to sustain it. And it doesn't mean that you're going to go get rich off the backs of other people. It just means that it's appropriate to do that. So what are the next stages for you in this? And just so that anybody that's listening can kind of hear it, if it has a name, go ahead and like say what the name is, but describe it however you want.
Yeah, so that is something I could definitely say, since that was one of my uses for being creative. I came up with the name. So it is called the Reframe Project, and it has a colon, thinking in the gray. So that's kind of our vision, is thinking in the gray instead of the black and white. And instead of framing something, we're reframing. We're trying to, think of things that already exist, nothing new, but in a new light. And then the next steps are probably to create next steps, if I'm very frank about it.
All right.
We have a vision document we're working on.
Okay, fine. Today. Vision and organization and, framework is a step.
Yeah.
It's a legit step. And do you have everybody involved that you need to be involved at this stage, or are you looking for other people?
Right now we kind of have a group of, I think, 12 to 14 people right now. And I'd say probably 8 to 10 of them are probably going to stay. Some of them, it's just misalignment, and they'll still help in some other way in the future, perhaps. But we want to make sure, it's really a close-knit founding group first.
Well, I love that you're open to that. This may not be appropriate for everybody, and that you're finding what your alignment is. In my past with nonprofits, we went through a very scarcity mindset, where whatever we had to do to keep anybody, we would do, and we would lose some of our essence in the process. And ultimately, for the kind of cause you're after, which, by the way, the Reframe Project, Living in the Gray, just speaks to me, especially as a person in recovery, because I like lived a life in black and white, all or nothing, good or bad, right or wrong. I just like everything was one or the other. And it's not the way a healthy world looks. So I love that's your mission and what you're up to, and that you're okay with that. This may not align with everybody. In fact, being accepting that whatever it is you're up to may not align with everybody, and being okay with that is such a healthy. Well, it's also like it's modeling your own thing.
Right. That's exactly true.
It's recursive. You're applying it to you.
That's true.
Which also speaks to me very deeply. There's a reason we ended up on this call together. So I love that you're up to that. I love that you're exploring. I would also love to bring you back as this entity, expands and develops, because one, it's a cause I can really, my heart supports. And do let me know, if there's anything I can do to be of help to you. But also this is the kind of journey, no matter how it goes, is worth sharing for lots of reasons. One, because the purpose and the helping of humanity. Also, you're being a founder, living your life out loud, and the lessons that you learn that work, the lessons that you learn that didn't work, are all gonna be useful. I personally want to know how this goes. And so I would love to have you be kind of a returning guest in some period of time.
And you bring up a great point, honestly. And you brought it up earlier too, is that, there is this sense of fear of trying something and it failing. And I mean, we've all been there before. I've definitely created things before that were complete flops, or started some new venture that didn't work out. And in time, I've learned that's valuable. It may be more valuable than the successes.
Yeah, and in fact, demonstrating that, there are not enough examples of that. And actually, one of the values I would love, people are shy about this, or at least they were in industry. I would love to have this podcast have at least even representation from people that are doing well at what they wanted, and people that have learned lessons through quote unquote failure. Because honestly, there's so much to learn about ourselves and our lives and about society by being willing to be open about those things, instead of what I used to do in my life, which is if I failed or I was behind, I would hide it. I could not tolerate, given how I was brought up,
Right.
having a failure be visible. And I projected my relationship from my dad along with every other person I met. And so one of the things I've learned kind of the hard way that I love that you're up to is like being able to like be with whatever it is that shows up. So I would love to have you back to have that conversation.
Cool. Definitely.
Well, in mindfulness of time and attention span, we're going to wind down this particular podcast. But before we do, is there anything that you want to make sure that people know? Any way that you would want to make sure that you can be contacted? I can put your LinkedIn profile link, in the notes for this, but anything else that needs to be said?
I mean, I think honestly, it's already a movement. So I'm just going to reiterate the movement. And most of the people watching your podcast probably came from that movement. But if you're watching this right now and you didn't, embrace the weird. Like a lot of people in this podcast or in a Teams meeting, Zoom call would have a virtual background right now. But this is part of that movement. I want you to see me. I want you to see what I like. I want you to see my room. I don't care that, this wall is not painted because it's a cheap rental. Like, I don't care. Throw off that corporate polish. You're going to do better in your business and your life. Just be you. That's what we want.
I really couldn't ask for a better message than that.
Great.
Michael, it's been really wonderful. Thank you very much for being here. Thanks for the great conversation. And I look forward to hearing how you're doing. I look forward to hearing how your kids are doing. I look forward to hearing how your movement continues and seeing you in the comment thread, sir.
Happy to share. Thank you very much.
Okay, you take care.
All right, you too. See ya.